I'm Tim Bradner, Capital Views. Thanks for joining us. We're here with Representative Mike Hawker of Anchorage, and we're going to talk about energy. It's a topic that's, if you live in Anchorage in South Central Alaska, very worried about natural gas shortages a couple of years ago. Suddenly, it's all gone away. We now maybe have a surplus of gas. And Mike, you were involved in that. You have some background in that. Maybe tell us a little about how that happened.
Oh, thanks, Tim. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here with you. Truly, the story of the Cook Inlet is one of the success stories, I think, of recent legislative history here. It's something I've been really proud to be part of. We had reached a point in my community of Anchorage where we were literally having brownout drills. Drills where our mayor, our community, were anticipating not having enough gas to keep the heat and lights on a cold winter day. That's a cause I took up a number of years ago, and we took a number of steps, and it's always been sort of called, as we've always said, there's no a single solution, but it's the silver BBs approach, where there's a number of smaller steps that cumulatively have really made a difference. We passed the Cook Inlet Recovery Act, which is legislation I sponsored, which enabled the development of the natural gas storage facility, a large underground storage facility that even this winter was being used to store gas in the summer and even during the winter on low load days and draw that gas out, meeting the peak demands. That buffer has been a real important part of our energy security issue. We also, within the Cook Inlet Recovery Act, had a provision that told the Regulatory Commission of Alaska that when they made decisions, they had to consider the consequences of saying no to a request for approval of sales contracts. And previously, they didn't have very explicit authority if they thought, well, maybe that contract could be negotiated a little tighter, a little bit better. Well, go back and do it again. As a result, there were a number of contracts with Marathon Oil that were denied in the mid-1980s. And at that time, Marathon kind of shut down the development of gas in the inlet. We saw the emergence of the shortages, and we reached a point just a couple, 3 years ago where there was only enough gas under contract for the utilities in my communities for another a year, 2 years at the most. Now, with the different approach by the RCA, as well as additional investment and development incentive credits in the inlet, and the coming of Hilcorp, who've taken over the assets of Marathon and are really making an investment in the inlet, we've got gas under contract to 2018 with the very real probability that there will be enough gas to get us beyond that point. So it's really been an all-hands approach to this, which has involved our local government. Has involved conservation. It's involved a change of ownership of some of the organizations in the inlet, and the legislature providing the appropriate regulatory and tax structures to make inlet development economic and feasible. It's been just a tremendous success story.
And Mike, you referred to those contracts that were before the RCA. As I recall, the issue was one of the issues of the RCA was totally focused on the price and did not interpret its mandate to be broad enough to consider security of supply, which seems amazing in retrospect.
And that is exactly what we addressed in the Cook Inlet Recovery Act when we said this decision is more than a pure pricing decision. It involves your concern and consideration of the energy security of our community. And there is a bit of a trade-off there, that we are willing to pay a little bit more for a contract in order to have the security. And once the RCA started citing that provision in their approval of contract applications, again, our utilities started getting a sufficient gas under contract, and that gas made available through the other activities of really a joint legislative effort focusing on development incentives in the inlet, some new players, particularly Hilcorp coming in, the other smaller entities that you go through and list them all, but we have seen a real revitalization of activity in the inlet where we've changed it from one big player, the Conocos and the Exxons in the inlet, into the new dynamic it is, which is a middle and smaller company play simply because the large gas domes have been depleted, and now it's a play for the aggressive smaller companies who are really willing to go after the smaller reserves that are just not economic for the guys with their big portfolio. We have truly successfully navigated a very rocky shoal to get where we're at.
Because just a year or so or 2 years ago, there was active planning underway to import liquefied natural gas. I mean, it was that serious.
Oh, very much so. And in fact, the Donlin mine, I think, is still looking at a potential importation of natural gas in order to make that project go, which is also why it's still so important. And I think there's a lot of confusion thinking that if we had a North Slope natural gas pipeline that brought gas to the inlet, it would somehow discourage development in the inlet, when in fact, if we had enough gas in the inlet, that we would open up a channel of marketing, a sales channel for that gas to be sold overseas, which is where we need a significant amount of gas coming in there. If that gas came from the North Slope, all of the developers, the explorers and the developers in the Cook Inlet also have access then to that overseas market, and it really promotes everybody's best interest. So it's always really, the more gas in the inlet, the better we're all going to be, both the consumer as well as the companies that want to develop the inlet.
And the real irony of this now is that we're so fearful of a shortage, but now we may have actually a surplus. We have companies that are finding gas that may not be able to find markets for them. And that's one of the reasons I think that people are hoping that LNG plant at Kenai may be reopened again to provide a market outlet. But we may someday have a larger LNG plant.
Very much. We've got two issues there. There would be a larger LNG plant at the end of an anchor sort of tenant, if you want to call it that, for a new North Slope natural gas pipeline. But the Department of Natural Resources last fall requested that ConocoPhillips reevaluate and file for export permits again for their existing LNG plant down there for just that purpose, to create an access to market so that we can continue to develop that resource in the inlet.
Mike, it's really encouraging to hear something about government doing something that works.
If there's anything in my personal legislative career and that of the people I've worked with in the legislature and in industry that I feel the best about in 12 years of my time here, has been what we've accomplished in the inlet. And it's to the credit not just to myself and my staff, but to everyone in the legislature that supported this. It was, we've done something really good here.
Good. Mike, thanks for joining us, sharing that with us. And Representative Mike Hawker, Anchorage, is with us, and I'm Tim Bradner with Capitol Views. Thank you for joining us.